These are the ancient world's power players who never got the headline but definitely did the workload. If history had LinkedIn, these people would be your boss. Enheduanna, circa 2300 BCE. Enheduanna shows up in Akkad like the royal version of a PR cleanup crew. Sargon of Akkad conquers Sumer, and everyone is grumpy about it. So he appoints his daughter as High Priestess of not for decor, for control. A priestess outranks war anger. Smart man, she is not a quiet figurehead. She controls the biggest temple complex in the region, the Temple of Inanna. That means land, grain, tribute, scribes, basically the state's spiritual payroll. You can picture a king handing her the national Wi-Fi password. Then a rebellion breaks out. A local ruler named Lugal-Ain kicks her out of the temple and tries to erase her. Enheduanna does not fold. She writes a text called The Exaltation of Inanna, begging the goddess to wreck her enemies. This is politics with footnotes. She is not singing hymns. She is building a legal case to reclaim her seat, one clay tablet at a time. She wins. The temple is restored. Her status returns. Her writing becomes state policy in disguise. She turns theology into a tool for unification. This is the first recorded moment in history where a written work shifts real-world power. No speeches, no scroll tours, just a priestess dropping a literary hammer harder than a sledge. We know she is the author because she signs the tablets. Not scribes say so. She signs them by name, the world's first verified author. Not a poet, not anonymous tradition. A documented human with a title, a political function, and receipts. She runs lunar rituals, manages property, supervises priests, and keeps Sargon's empire glued together by faith instead of blades. When later scribes copy her hymns centuries after her death, they still credit her. That is how you know she was not court decoration. She was infrastructure. What do you call a woman who controls belief, treasury access, and legitimacy in 2300 BCE? The empire's firewall. And yes, history buried her for 2,000 years. Typical. But the clay tablets survived. Clay does not care about erasure campaigns. Enheduanna wrote herself into power, then wrote everyone else into compliance. The first author on record was also the first person to weaponize literature. And it worked. Puabi of around 2600 BCE. Before royal crowns became a costume contest, there was Puabi. She does not rule from a throne. She rules from a ledger. Archaeologists found her tomb in the royal cemetery of labeled PG 800, packed with wealth that screams economic authority, not ornament. Gold, carnelian, lapis lazuli, silver bowls, fine textiles, and imported goods from as far as the Indus Valley. That is not burial decor. That is a trade network rolled into a coffin. Her cylinder seal calls her Nin, a high-ranking title closer to governor-priestess than queen. People think of kings swinging swords. Puabi signs paychecks. She is one of the earliest verified women with direct control over distribution of goods. The tomb layout shows she did not marry into power. She held it, alone. No consort of attached. At this time is a commercial hot zone, moving metals, stones, and grains between city-states. Markets run on trust. Trust runs on seals. Puabi's seal is basically a VIP clearance stamp for the economy. When a shipment moves, her authority travels with it. Her burial attendants also tell a story. These were not dancers in a parade. They were staff. Her personal workforce enters the grave with her because her role in life was administrative, ritual, and high-ranking. This is not symbolism. This is payroll continuity in the afterlife. Archaeology confirms she owned elite goods before later dynasties ever formed. Economic clout like this means she probably directed temple surplus, harvest tribute, and long-distance trade. In a world where kings brag about smashing enemies, Puabi's power is the quiet kind. She decides which merchants still have a job tomorrow. People call her mysterious because she leaves no speeches. Of course she leaves no speeches. Managers leave records, not poetry. And the record is 12 pounds of gold and imported lapis sitting in a grave saying, "Yes, I ran things." Imhotep, circa 2650 BCE. Imhotep does not show up as a background genius. He walks into Egypt's third dynasty and rewrites construction reality. King Djoser wants a tomb. Imhotep builds a 6-tiered stone monument so massive that it turns into the first pyramid in history. Before him, tombs are mud brick mastabas. After him, stone becomes the national brand. He is not just the architect. He is chief builder, priest, engineer, physician, and royal problem solver. Ancient Egypt loved long job titles, but Imhotep is the first guy where the list is justified. His name is carved beside Djoser's, which is rare. Most architects vanish under royal credit. Imhotep gets recorded. That means he mattered. The step pyramid at Saqqara is not a guess. It is a proof of concept. It shows early experiments with stress, load distribution, and multi-level chambers long before geometry textbooks existed. Imhotep could hold a plumb line in one hand and a national ego in the other. He also reorganizes quarry labor, logistics, and stone transport. This is not just building walls. This is inventing a supply chain. Egypt transitions from stack bricks to carve mountains, and it happens under one administrator. He later gains a reputation as a healer. Egyptian medical papyri attribute procedures and prognosis to him centuries after his death. Historians do not confuse him with myth, because the timeline is clear. Architect first, physician later in legacy. But the reason people remembered him at all is because Egypt was still walking around inside his engineering blueprint. Most empires start with armies. Egypt starts with an architect who teaches them how to build permanence. When later pharaohs start bragging with larger pyramids, they are copying homework he already turned in. Djoser gets a tomb. Imhotep gets history. He did not invent glory. He invented the stage that glory stands on. Egypt's immortality obsession starts with a guy who proves the afterlife looks better when your grave is taller than the horizon. Senmut, around 1470 BCE. Senmut enters Egyptian politics like a walking spreadsheet. Hatshepsut rises to power, and this man becomes the operating system of her government. His title count is ridiculous. Steward of the king's daughter, chief architect, overseer of all royal works, controller of the double granary. And yes, the job might as well be guy who keeps the country upright. He is not a noble by birth. He climbs through merit, which in pharaonic Egypt is like speedrunning the class system. Inscriptions show him managing the expedition to Punt, the trading mission that brings back incense trees, exotic goods, and expensive bragging rights. One temple wall turns him into the project manager of wealth. Ancient Egypt's most successful supply run is stamped with his name. Then there is Deir el-Bahri. He coordinates its construction. The terraces, ramps, and symmetry are not just pretty architecture. They are proof of a government that can plan, fund, and execute long-term projects without collapsing. Senmut sets up worker schedules, material flows, and transport systems. You could drop him into a modern logistics firm and he would still outrank everyone by lunch. We also know he held unprecedented access to the royal household. That part makes later historians squint, because it is rare for a non-royal to stand this close to power and not fall into a ditch later. His likeness shows up in Hatshepsut's temples, tombs, and statues, not because he is ornamental, but because he is operational. His monumental tomb plans, 2 of them, show how high his status climbed. Egyptian officials normally get 1 tomb. Senmut starts building 2, like he is bookmarking himself in stone. One even sits near the Valley of the Kings, which is political boldness disguised as limestone. The reason he matters is simple. Hatshepsut's stable reign is not magic. It is management. Senmut keeps trade flowing, construction running, and the treasury breathing. Pharaohs can claim divine right all day. Someone still has to handle invoices. Kikuli of Mitanni, circa 1400 BCE. Kikuli never swings a sword, yet half of the Bronze Age arms race sits on his training schedule. He works for the Mitanni, the horse-obsessed powerhouse of northern Mesopotamia, and his expertise is so valuable that the Hittites borrow him, not just his animals. When a kingdom hires your brain instead of your army, you are not a horse trainer. You are military infrastructure. His tablets have survived from Hattusa, and they are signed in the opening line, "I am Kikuli, master horse trainer of Mitanni." That is the ancient version of credentials attached. The document outlines a 214-day conditioning system for war horses. Not a casual stable routine, but a full-scale performance manual. Step by step. Measured intervals, feeding schedules, cool-down timing, rotational pacing. Centuries before sports science gets a name, Kikuli is already inventing it. His secret weapon is endurance. Chariot warfare needs horses that can sprint, recover, and go again without collapsing. Without conditioning, you have a parade float. With Kikuli's method, you have battlefield artillery on legs. The Hittites used this edge to dominate chariot combat for generations. They do not suddenly become better warriors. They become better supplied with horsepower that doesn't die mid-charge. That is the part history textbooks skip. Empires do not win wars with courage. They win with logistics. And Kikuli is logistics wearing a stable robe. He also introduces graded training, what modern coaches call interval training, over 3 millennia before track athletes pretend they discovered it. He rotates terrain exposure, water timing, and rest periods so the animals build stamina without injury. Every line of his manual screams, "This kingdom funds research." Hittite chariot supremacy at battles like Kadesh does not appear from thin air. It appears because Kikuli turned horses into regulated military equipment instead of decorative mounts. When kings start flexing about their elite cavalry, they are basically bragging about the world's first fitness coach. His work proves something every empire learns too late. Strategy begins in the stables. Kikuli didn't ride the chariot. He made sure the empire reached the battlefield still standing. Ahikar the sage, around 700 BCE. Ahikar is not a warrior, not a king, and not a temple official. He is something more dangerous in an imperial court, the man everyone listens to. He serves as senior counselor under Sennacherib and then Esarhaddon in the Neo-Assyrian Empire. His job is simple: tell absolute monarchs when they are about to do something stupid. That is a risky career path before job security was invented. His story survives in the Wisdom of Ahikar, found in Aramaic at Elephantine. This is the earliest preserved example of a civil servant training the next generation through written instruction. He mentors his adopted nephew, Nadin, who later betrays him. Court life was basically a telenovela scripted in cuneiform. Ahikar becomes the blueprint for the state advisor, part strategist, part ethics police, part please don't start a war today department. He teaches moderation, restraint, and political patience in a palace that prefers loud solutions. The betrayal part is not legend padding. The texts say Nadine accuses him of treason. Ahikar is sentenced to death, but the executioner fakes the killing because even the palace staff knows the empire works better when Ahikar is breathing. He hides until the king discovers the lie and reinstates him. That is what you call early whistleblower protection, Assyrian edition. His advice texts read like ancient workplace policy. He tells officials not to abuse power because it backfires. He warns against greed because corruption kills credibility. He basically invents government accountability before anyone writes the term, without swords, without laws, just reputation and steady statecraft. The empire around him runs on war, tribute, and intimidation. Ahikar runs on foresight. His sayings get copied into Aramaic, Syriac, Armenian, and Greek because every later bureaucracy looks at him and thinks, yes, this is the manual. Even later traditions borrow his structure for moral instruction, though he gets erased from credit in most of them. He survives assassination by paperwork sabotage and returns to office because the empire runs smoother when adults supervise the monarchs. History remembers kings who conquered land. Ahikar conquered bad decisions. Artemisia I of Caria, 480 BCE. Artemisia walks into the Greco-Persian War like she skipped the memo that women were not supposed to command naval fleets. She rules Halicarnassus as a satrap under Xerxes and brings her own ships to the invasion force. Not loaned, not borrowed, hers. When Persia marches into Greece, most allies show up because they must. Artemisia shows up because she chooses to. Her name appears in Herodotus, Book 8, which is our live feed for this era. He cannot resist pointing out two things at once. She is brilliant and she is terrifyingly competent. Xerxes listens to her, more than half the men in his war council. She tells him not to attack at Salamis. He ignores her. Naturally. Once the battle starts, her tactics are ruthless. She escapes pursuit by ramming and sinking an allied ship in her way. The Greek captain chasing her stops, assuming she must be Persian elite since she just destroyed one of her own. That maneuver saves her crew. Modern historians call it deception. Ancient Caria calls it survival. Her troops fight hard, and she does not flinch. Xerxes hears the report and reportedly says, "My men have become women, and my women have become men." That is the 5th century BCE version of, "She carried the team." Meanwhile, most Persian admirals sink without style. Artemisia then advises Xerxes, again, to retreat rather than waste the rest of the fleet. This time he listens. That means she influences the strategic withdrawal that prevents a humiliating deeper loss. She is not a symbol. She is a working military brain. She also stays in power afterward. No disgrace, no punishment, no exile. A female commander winning royal trust after a naval disaster is rarer than a peaceful Spartan, and she manages it without soft diplomacy. Only competence. The detail people miss is that she was not Greek but Greek ruled by Persia. She is navigating culture, empire, and patriarchy with the agility of a veteran captain sailing through rocks. Gandhi, 4th century BCE. Gandhi is the reason ancient China could read the sky like a spreadsheet. He works in the state of Chu during the Warring States period, when everyone is spying, scheming, and occasionally inventing astronomy between invasions. Unlike philosophers who debate stars for fun, Gandhi measures them, by hand. With eyesight alone, his surviving records show he tracked Jupiter with obsessive precision. Around 365 BCE, He documents what appears to be one of Jupiter's moons, nearly 2,000 years before Galileo gets credit in Europe. He also notes dark spots on the sun, which means sunspot observation long before telescopes. The man is basically a human observatory. He publishes his findings in the Treatise on Jupiter, part of early Chinese star catalogs. These are not mythic cosmology texts. They are raw data tables used for state planning, calendars, and omen tracking. This is science weaponized for bureaucracy. When rulers want to know if divine timing supports a campaign, they ask men like Gandhi. He is Google Calendar for the sky. His calculations matter because ancient monarchs tie legitimacy to celestial order. If the heavens wobble, the throne shakes. Gandhi makes sure the throne does not panic every time a cloud moves. That is real political value. He stabilizes confidence by stabilizing data. He also tries classifying constellations with a level of detail rare for his age. Later astronomers build on his notes the same way programmers build on early code. Greek astronomy gets most of the spotlight in textbooks, but Gandhi works centuries earlier with nothing but disciplined observation. The reason he stays underrated is simple. His work lives inside technical scrolls, not dramatic storytelling. And scrolls do not brag, they just sit there, being right. Cynisca of Sparta, 396 BCE. Cynisca does not enter Greek history as a protest, she enters as a flex. She is born a Spartan princess, sister of King Agesilaus II, and instead of chasing court life, she chases glory through horses. At Olympia, women are not allowed to compete in person, but they can own a chariot team. Cynisca sees the loophole and drives a war chariot through it. In 396 BCE, her team wins the four-horse chariot race. Her name is recorded as Victor, not her driver, her. This is the first time a woman appears in Olympic victory records. 2 games later, she does it again, repeat champion. Sparta is already famous for women training, inheriting property, and managing estates. But Cynisca turns that cultural permission into public spectacle. The win is political. Chariot racing is the Formula One of the ancient world. Expensive, elite, and used as a bragging platform for aristocrats. Most men enter to flex coin. Cynisca enters to prove ownership power. She does not stand in the stadium. She does not wave a laurel's wreath. She lets the scoreboard talk. Her victory inscription survives. I, Cynisca, won this crown with my chariot and my horses. That line is pure Spartan attitude. The funny reaction is how Athens tries to downplay it. Male victors brag forever. Cynisca wins twice, and suddenly half of Greece pretends the event doesn't really count. The surest sign she hit a nerve is that her achievement sparked debate over whether female economic power should be visible. Spoiler, too late. She does not reform anything. She does not run a movement. She simply exists so loudly that patriarchy has to pretend she didn't, which means she won twice, in the race and in the denial campaign. People think Sparta produced warriors. Yes, it did. It also produced a woman who humiliated the Olympic Boys Club with prize horses and bookkeeping. Cynisca does not crack the system. She uses its fine print. That is the most Spartan move possible. Tanaquil of Rome, 6th century BCE. Before Rome has senators in marble and generals posing for statues, it has Tanaquil, the unofficial HR department of the monarchy. She is an Etruscan noblewoman married to Tarquinius Priscus, the 5th king of Rome. And like every strong administrator, she is more competent than the man wearing the crown. Tanaquil does the thing Roman men hate most. She notices patterns and plans ahead. When she and her husband first arrive in Rome, she predicts his rise using an omen. An eagle steals his cap and drops it back. The locals see a bird trick. She sees a political forecast. Soon enough, Tarquinius becomes king, but her real move comes later. Tarquinius gets assassinated. The palace is chaos. The succession line is unstable. If the wrong noble grabs power, the monarchy collapses. So Tanaquil shuts the doors, tells the public the king is recovering, and stalls until she installs her candidate, Servius Tullius. He is not royal by birth. He is her pick. She manufactures continuity before Rome even has a legal rulebook. This is not myth fluff. Livy and Dionysius of Halicarnassus both record her as the operator behind the throne. The Roman monarchy survives a disaster because a queen consort runs crisis management like a professional. She also engineers Servius's legitimacy by attaching omens to him early on. One story says his head glows with divine fire as a child. People mock the supernatural detail today, but in ancient politics, that is branding. She builds public buy-in before anyone can contest him. Rome loves pretending it was built by iron-jawed warrior kings. But one of its most important transitions happens because a woman controls information flow, succession timing, And narrative framing. You can picture the guards confused while she handles government like she is sorting laundry. She is also the reason Servius rules long enough to pass real reforms. Census structure, wealth tiers, and voting by class. All downstream of her power transfer. No Tanaquil. No Servius. No Servius, no stable Rome before the Tarquin meltdown. Roman historians try to shrink her role, which is usually how you know someone was pivotal. Kings wiggle into crowns. Tanaquil welds them on. She does not just influence a throne. She replaces the driver without stopping the carriage, and Rome keeps moving.